And she gave birth to her son, her firstborn. And she wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room or place for them in the inn.
No room or place for them in the inn. That was a long, long time ago. It was a long, long ways away. But the memories of people are also very, very long. And no one forgets the events of this particular night where I was involved. Unless people forget the truth. Now, I don't blame people for forgetting the truth, because the truth is an evasive and subtle commodity. In fact, the difference between a lie and the truth could be the flicker of an eyelid or the tone of one's voice. If I were to say, "I believe," that would be a lie. But if I were to say, "I believe," that may be the truth. So I do not blame posterity at all for forgetting all the subtleties of that night and that event that cast me as the black villain. You know, the heartless one. The one that said, "No room, no, there's no room in the inn." I'll even grant you that a kind of villainy might even be part of that truth. But if you want to speak the whole truth as you remember it and you interpret it, then you must do so with catch in your voice, maybe a little bit of a quiver, or possibly a little hesitation with a glint of a tear in your eye. Because nothing is entirely black. Not even the human heart. I speak to you all as people of the world. Not as idealists, but I speak to you as realists. Now, how many of you have ever run an inn? How many of you have ever run a business? How many of you have ever run anything for that matter? Even your own life? It's like being in a forest with 1,000,000 trees. And every one of those trees is something to be done. Oh, I hope there are clean linens on the beds for our guests. I hope they have enough water to bathe themselves. I hope we have enough food in the pantry for them to eat. I hope we have enough money in the bank to feed ourselves next week and to pay our bills. Today we have enough food in our bellies, and tomorrow we'll have enough clothing on our back. But what about next week? Or the week after? Or what about next year? 1,000,000 trees, 1,000,000 things, until finally we have eyes for nothing else, and whatever we see turns into a thing. The sparrow that lies in the dust at your feet becomes a thing to be kicked away, not seen as the mystery of death. The children playing outside your window become nothing but a nuisance and a distraction, rather than life, the greatest mystery of all. And what of the whispering air that comes suddenly from somewhere, and it becomes just the wind, only the wind? Of course, I remember that night clearly. I remember that night clearly when they arrived. I was working on my accounts, sitting at my table. And just as I looked up, the woman walked through my door. She walked in slowly, sort of heavy-footed, the way women do in their last weeks, as if she was walking through a dream. And her husband stood somewhat behind her. He was tongue-tied and kind of not paying much attention. I felt he was a bit of a lost soul, a helpless kind of man, I thought. Now, I don't remember whether or not they spoke or said anything to me, but they must have, because I understood and I knew what it was they needed. I knew what they wanted. But mostly it was just silence. That clumsy kind of silence of the poor. You know what I mean. I don't mean that unkindly. But I certainly knew what they needed and what they wanted. It was extraordinary. The stars had come out that night. I remember it perfectly, and I don't particularly know why, because I was spending my time inside. My wife's cat had jumped up on my table at where I sat. I had not stood up, of course. I just sat there with them in the silence. And then it happened. It happened just as you know it happened. I did not lie. I did not lie about there being no room. There truly was no room in the inn. But if there had been, I may have lied. I may have lied more for their sake than the inn's. Because, those kind of people would be far more comfortable in a stable where it was warm. I don't mean that unkindly with ill will. God only knows. And then later that night, when the baby came, I was not there. I was lost in the forest. The unenchanted forest of 1,000,000 trees. The cellar is 15 paces down that way. Mind your head as you walk down those stairs. The firewood needs to be piled to the left, and don't let the fire go out, otherwise it may freeze the human heart. Pay attention. But it was only the wind, just the wind. So I speak to you as people of the world. So when that baby came, I was not around. I was not there. I missed him. As for what I heard, just at that moment of birth, when nobody becomes a somebody, I don't quite remember what it was I heard. But this I do know. My own true love. All your life long, you wait for your own true love. We, all of us, do. We wait for our hope, for our love, for our destiny, for our heart's desire. So how am I to say it, my gentle people? How am I to say it? That when that baby was born, I missed him. So pray for me. Pray for the innkeeper. Pray for our own true love. Pray for all of us, so that when our one true love arrives again, we do not miss him. Thanks be to God.